One of the biggest concerns, I think, when Jeff Sessions was being considered as the next Attorney General is that based on his history, it seemed pretty obvious that this guy does not give a damn about civil rights. And if he's the man that is supposed to be keeping the states in check and making sure that people's civil rights aren't routinely being violated, that people don't have any faith in him to do that. And unfortunately, it looks like those fears were completely accurate because the Department of Justice is already, in addition to other federal departments, which we're gonna break down, is changing policies that make it more and more likely that states are going to get away with violating people's civil rights. Top officials in the DOJ's Civil Rights Division have issued verbal instructions through the ranks to seek settlements without consent decrees, which would result in no continuing court oversight. A person with knowledge of the instructions said attorneys should default to using settlements without court oversight unless there is an unavoidable reason for a consent decree. There's no written policy guidance. It's purely verbal. So what are those consent decrees that were referenced in both of those graphics? Consent decrees spell out specific steps that must be taken to remedy the harm that is the core of these cases. These are agreed to by both parties and signed off on by a judge, whom the parties can appear before, again, if the terms are not being met, which basically just means that, actually bringing it to the concern of the federal government, it won't simply then just disappear from their radar afterward, that theoretically a path forward will be set up, an idea of what will be a correction of the harm so that you can check back, see if that has actually happened. And if people aren't following through on that, there is a judge in charge that you can go back to.
It is like putting a department that has violated civil rights, like a police department or a state or an election board in a state. It is exactly the same, essentially, as putting them on parole.
Yeah.
And making them go before a parole officer where you have to pee in a cup, show that you're not doing coke, and show that you haven't violated the terms of your probation and that you haven't gone back to your criminal ways.
Yeah.
I got it. Sometimes for well-meaning departments, especially departments that do police departments in specific that do a authentic job of getting rid of the people who caused the problem. Then the new people come in and they think, hey, why are we? I don't need this burden. I'm taking it seriously. That's literally why I'm here. And I'm sure we'll get to this shortly in the story, but just in case we don't, like, there are so many ways to perhaps alleviate some of the burdens on some consent decrees, like on school boards, for example, and not do away with the consent decrees.
Yeah.
I mean, one of them is to show that over the course of 3 years, you don't do anything that tells them that you're not following the consent decree. I mean, I just got here, right? I don't know about consent decrees. I'm not a lawyer either. 2 years? Like there's a lot of ways to do this without rolling up and throwing consent decrees away.
Yeah, but your proposed changes would not be as effective at allowing these police departments
just to do nothing,
voting boards to do whatever the hell they want.
Do whatever you want.
And think, especially, I mean, this is going to affect people's lives in any number of different places. I mean, we're talking about police abuses of various sorts. Again, it could influence behavior and conduct in schools as well. But let's focus on one area. So we have a bit of a problem, you might not have heard of it, of voter suppression and disenfranchisement across the country, where especially poorer people, especially racial minorities, students as well, will often have legal changes in places like Texas and North Carolina and any number of other states. And we're talking about the majority of states at this point that make it harder to vote in 100 different ways. So what do you do about that? I mean, the Voting Rights Act has been shredded, unfortunately. There was a chance that we could patch it back up, but now Donald Trump chose the new Supreme Court judge. That's probably not going to happen.
Ridiculous.
So instead, on a case-by-case basis, at least you could go to the DOJ and have them step in and try to right those wrongs. But now, I mean, they've now given carte blanche to these states to effectively do whatever the hell they want. And that means that people will lose the right to vote, amongst many other extremely important rights.
This wasn't a theoretical decision. I don't want to relitigate this stuff, but this wasn't a theoretical decision. You made this guy the most powerful person in the world.
Jeff Sessions.
Right, well, he's this, what? The Attorney General of the United States of America?
He apparently believes that he is Donald Trump's lawyer, which is not actually what his job is, but he seems pretty sure
Attorney General
that's
of the United States of America.
Exactly.
Mike Huckabee. So you made this guy, you made Trump the most powerful person in the world. So his Attorney General is, I don't know, where do you think that ranks? 8th most powerful person in the world, like
I would
19th,
think maybe higher.
Right. I mean, it's top 20. It might be top 6, right? You know.
We'll do a power ranking after the show.
This guy doesn't care. This guy, look, you know, it is too harsh to call him a racist. But it is, you know, it might. By the way, not my. I mean, it is too.
Is it?
No, I don't know that it's too harsh. It is too simplistic, and you'll lose people.
Okay. Agreed.
But you said something exactly right. The way this is a guy who is indifferent or hostile to civil rights.
Best case scenario does not care.
Right, that is a best case scenario, doesn't care. But this is hostility towards civil rights, and how the idea that the Department of Justice wouldn't bend over backwards and do everything it possibly could to ensure that every single American had the right to vote is beyond me. And this is not a states' rights issue. This is a federal issue. These are federal elections. You want to change the rules and make it harder to register for the state to vote in state legislative races, or for governor, or for your Secretary of State, or Attorney General, or dog catcher, or City Council? I would argue against that too, but I could take a step back because I wouldn't have, but you would just be complicating yourself by having 2 sets of rules. But there should be 1 set of rules, because your congressman from Texas affects my life. Yes. And my daughter's life, and John's life, and whatever gamer he ends up spending his life with, right? Fingers crossed.
Agreed. Yes. And so we have some more details, but again, in this particular, and the reason I'm focusing on the voting rights is that theoretically the idea is, oh shit, this is horrible. Let's change this. Let's win some elections, perhaps some congressional elections, senatorial elections. Hey, there's all these special elections happening. Well, when people's rights are violated, they're going to be appealing to Jeff Sessions, and that is going to affect every election going forward, thanks to this new unwritten rule. But by the way, it's not just limited to the Department of Justice. This philosophy has infested multiple federal departments. The Department of Education has laid out plans to loosen requirements on investigations into civil rights complaints, according to an internal memo sent to staff on June 8th and obtained by ProPublica. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos has also proposed cutting over 40 positions from the Civil Rights Office. So when all those questions from the senators about whether she would actually investigate these sorts of complaints, we weren't sure, but now we are. She's not only telling them not to look into it, but she's making sure that there's almost no one left to look into it, theoretically.
We know everything. None of this is news. Of course this was who this
What about this? In its 2018 fiscal plan, the Labor Department has proposed dissolving the office that handles discrimination complaints. So just get rid of the entire thing. So if your workplace, if your boss is violating your rights, again, in a number of different ways, but let's say he's a goddamn racist and he's treating you that way, you might have no one to appeal to. I guess you could try to go directly to Attorney General Jeff Sessions. I'm not sure that's going to work for you. But by the way, also similar, new leadership at the EPA has proposed entirely eliminating the Environmental Justice Program. So if the programs remain, they're made. Exactly.
Can't believe it.
Yeah. So the programs that remain will be defanged and told not to investigate these things, and that's the few that will remain because the others are being shut down, whether in the DOJ, Department of Education, Department of Labor, the EPA, up and down and in and out our federal government. When it comes to environmental justice, racial justice, gender issues, all of that, got to find someone else to complain to because the federal government don't give a damn anymore.
My dad hated the use of the word gender. He was like, it used to be sex. We used to say sex, but now
Those
you can't say
things.
sex. Now you can't say sex.
Well, you can, but in reference to sex.
Contextually, you used to be able to figure that out.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, but so he hated the word gender. Hated it. Till the day he died, he hated it when people used to be like, oh, gender, you mean sex.
Well, don't worry, the department's been eliminated.
A couple things, but can you guys get graphic 14? It was the first graphic in the story ready. But first, this quote from, just so you know, it's not John and me. Vanita Gupta was the former acting head of the DOJ's Civil Rights Division under President Obama. She said regarding the elimination of consent decrees under the Trump administration, at best, this administration believes civil rights enforcement is superfluous and can be easily cut. At worst, it's really part of a systematic agenda to roll back civil rights. There's no question that's what it is. They don't care about civil rights at best. At worst, they are deliberately hostile to civil rights. I think it's pretty clear that it's at worst. And then get that graphic ready, because the only thing you need to know is the last couple of words of that first graphic that starts there with top officials in the DOJ Civil Rights Division issued the verbal instructions through the ranks to seek settlements without consent decrees. All you have to do is pay attention to whatever that is, 7 words, which would result in no continuing court oversight. So
that is the goal.
You can do whatever, that's the goal. That's all they wanted to do, to make sure that nobody is looking over their shoulder, because it is burdensome and they don't like it. To the earlier point that we were making, that like this Boston College American politics professor, R. Ship Melnick, said the new approach could take some regulatory pressure off schools and districts. I'm a little more sympathetic about schools and districts than I am about police departments and
voting boards,
and voting boards, right? Those need to be watched like hawks, right? But so here's a situation where, because he says the new approach, the education department no longer requires civil rights investigators to obtain 3 years of complaint data from a specific school or district to assess compliance. So you used to have essentially to give them 3 years of a clean. That's where I was talking about. Okay, 2. Like, we'll make it easier. 18 months. There's things we could come to where you'd think, okay, they've done it for 2 years. Maybe they're going ahead and complying. The notion that we just say no, continue to violate civil rights. We don't care. We don't want to hear it. We've said don't, but we're not going to put any teeth into this at all.
Yeah.
So just keep in mind, no continuing court oversight. That means there's no oversight and they can do whatever they want. And that was their goal. That was their goal on all this stuff. Let businesses, let election boards, let police department, let everybody do whatever they want. We aren't interested in being involved. That is who you elected. That was clear in January of 2016. It was clear when he got nominated over the summer. It was clear on November 8th.
Membership helps fund the Young Turks. You know one great thing about that? That means we're not accountable to anyone but you guys. That's why we're strong together, because we built this show around you. Come build it even bigger and better at tytnetwork.com/join.